If we start firstly with that concept of stuff that sucks, for all of us, it brings certain experiences to mind. What I do is I break down the range. I try to take the range of experiences we have with things that don't work and identify the 5 main variables that cause us as customers to conclude this sucks. Those 5 characteristics apply to every single kind of product. One is the complexity. So if a characteristic of a product is that it's complex, that it's hard to use, that is automatically going to make it a contender for stuff that sucks. Now, people who are innovators, depending on the field you're in, very frequently can come up with brand new products that are even more complex than the products they intend to replace. So you can have what you think is a brand new, better product or service, but from the customer's perspective, what do they conclude? And if you just took that concept of complexity and say, does it increase or reduce complexity, that tells you a lot about whether it's going to be viewed as stuff that sucks or not. In fact, on that particular concept, today when we look at industrial design and we look at companies that are overwhelmingly have been successful with their end user customers, the first name that would come to us all would be Apple. Well, Apple's ease of use is a key criteria for all of their innovations. And when you look at the innovations that they've had that have not been successful, like the Newton, ease of use was a factor. So that's part of what goes into this innovation versus the stuff that sucks. From the producer's perspective, we can apply innovation to things that a customer may never experience, but the users of that innovation within the organization could be viewed as customers. And if we look at it that way, and we ask them what they think as a user of the innovation right within the enterprise, they will themselves say something that's not complimentary. Tom Peters once said that his market was all organizations that had customers they wanted to satisfy. I thought that was a pretty good description, and I view it the same way. So I think about the target audience as people who probably more than anything have tried to figure out not just how to innovate. That's something that I have found is not necessarily something that needs a lot of teaching to. More so, it's a matter of how do you sell the innovation that you create, and how do you make sure that the innovation that you're thinking of passes certain tests that will enable it to be successful. So anybody who wants to do that, anybody who wants to sell an improvement, or anybody who, not sell it literally, but persuade others to acquire it, those would be the people interested in, I think, this program. How I got into this field of work is something that I've kept a fairly closely guarded secret. Most business leaders or consultants would generally shy away from admitting right away that they've done time in prison. I started my career not just in a maximum security prison, the largest maximum security prison in the country at the time, but I started off in the psychiatric ward. Now, you might be thinking, what the heck did I do to end up there? Well, what I did was I applied for a civil service job and I got it. But the job I got was not one that was published. I got a job that was a one-of-a-kind thing for which a federal grant had been obtained. And my job was to run the academic, vocational, and psychological testing for all the male convicted felons in the state of Michigan. And I worked in a place that was euphemistically called the Reception and Guidance Center. I assure you there was very little reception, not too much guidance, and the reception was not one you would want. I was 23 years old at the time, and to make a very long story short, my reason for getting into corrections was because I had mistakenly gotten into a senior level course in criminology when I was a sophomore in college, And I was fascinated by the course because it looked like there was so much going wrong in the corrections system in the country that if I were to go in there and do something that was anything, it would make a difference. And in fact, that's what I did. When I went into this place, what I did was I applied what I thought was common sense. I saw people sitting around wasting a lot of time, not doing anything, not going anywhere, which they had to do from the facility that I was in, which was a temporary housing place. And they were going to go and spend time elsewhere to serve their sentence. And I suggested that we streamline the operation. I gave my written suggestions to the warden. And his response basically was, we did not have a problem until you got here. That was my introduction to change and how easy it is. Again, just shortening the whole story here, but I got a new boss in about 6 months after I had started. The new boss came in and he had a set of power relationships that went outside the institution. And he came to me one day and he said, "Things are really screwed up here, aren't they?" And I wasn't sure if this was an indictment on my performance or what. And I said, "What are you referring to?" And he said, and he started to describe what he was observing, which is the same thing I had observed. And I agreed with him. And he said, "Do you think you could do something about this?" Well, this was not my job. I mean, it was not my job description, but I was interested in it. And I said, "Well, sure I can. What would you like me to do?" He said, "I'd like you to analyze the situation and put some recommendations together and give it to me." And I said, "Well, when do you want that?" And he said, "Whenever you get to it." Well, I went to my drawer, pulled out my report that I'd given to the warden that had been trashed, walked it over to his office, he read it, and he says, "Damn, this is a great idea. Let's do it." Well, a year later, we had transformed the entire facility. We had shortened the cycle time of going through it for inmates from 45 days to 15 days. We had eliminated one of the 2 cell blocks necessary, which meant we had been able to reduce the budget for this place by 40%. And all of a sudden, 2 things happened for me personally. Number one is, for the warden that I had initially presented the proposal for, I was definitely persona non grata. Secondly is, there were other people who thought this was a pretty cool thing for a junior guy who was a college trainee 07 when I came in, to make changes almost single-handedly with the help of my boss and transform the organization. That experience of having an enlightened boss, the time to work on things and experiment, spoiled me in my whole career. So from there on, I understood what was possible and that anything is possible given the right circumstances. And that caused me later on to go from corrections into the computer world, which most people would not think of as a linear change. But for me, it worked. And I took all of my thinking that I had experienced in the prison into the computer world, found that it actually worked very well, and caused me to be able to make changes where I worked in the computer business of the same magnitude that I had in the correction system. And that's how I got to do what I do now, which I love.